Did Russia give you this information or anybody associated with Russia?
Our source is not a state party. So the answer for our interactions is no.
You did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails. Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or
Yes.
anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
That was WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange on this program back in January, saying and denying that Russia had anything to do with giving WikiLeaks the hacked Democratic emails during the 2016 election. Now, this is important as we continue with the executive vice president of the Hill, John Solomon. I've interviewed him, as I said, 4 times on radio. I've interviewed him once on television. And here's an interesting sidebar. Whether you like WikiLeaks or not, and I know that at times Democrats liked him, at times Republicans liked him. But here's a guy that hacked into the DOD and NASA when he was 16. I think he's now 45. Now, at some point, we've got to say, shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. Now shame on America for not building the cybersecurity that they should have. And so there's a lot of angry people, which I understand.
Sure.
But they also have a responsibility. But 11 years, WikiLeaks has never gotten it wrong. So Rohrabacher, the congressman from California, meets with him.
Right.
And Julian is saying he's got the proof it wasn't Russia. And he would be the one guy, I think, in the whole world that would know more than anybody. So here's the question. Rohrabacher now has a message for the president. What did he tell you about that?
He said that he has some non-public information that Julian Assange gave him that he's going to take back to the president. He also had a request from Assange, which he was willing to talk about, which was Assange would like WikiLeaks to have a seat in the White House press corps. So there's a little horse trading going on in these negotiations.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing Julian Assange signal that he might be open to do some sort of deal. The question is the American government, is the Congress interested in doing such a deal with a guy who has brought a lot of harm to national intelligence sources from the information he's released? He's not a hero in the intelligence community, that's for sure.
I know he's not a hero in the intelligence community, but again, I go back to, you know, at some point, well, we saw how corrupt Hillary Clinton was. We learned an awful lot about what happened to Bernie Sanders, didn't we, in that whole mess? That Bernie, that primary was rigged. There was a story with Debbie Wasserman Schultz because he got fired on the eve of the Democratic National Convention, right?
That's right. Yeah, no, listen, there's 3 things that Julian Assange over the last 10 years has brought to light. One, how penetrable our supposedly secure systems in government were, how easy it was to hack. 2, how much surveillance was going on of Americans that no one really knew about,
how
much more
Hillary is.
And then 3, the entire Democratic National Committee storyline where it looked like the party was trying to hamper the election opportunities of Bernie Sanders. And I think those are 3 storylines that are not in question. People recognize that WikiLeaks had a contribution to that. I did something before I came on tonight. I made a couple calls in the intelligence community. I had one interesting response I want to share with you, Sean. One of the big intelligence sources I talked to said, listen, we've said all along we're confident Russia did some hacking in the election. We didn't say they were the only ones that hacked. And I think that was the first sign in any time I've talked to someone in intelligence that there might be some room.
All right, what's really, I think, important, and it's interesting with Chelsea Manning now, and you factor that into this equation. Right. And I've been to the Ecuadorian embassy. It's a tiny space. He's holding firm. He believes in his principles. He said to me that he says, I'm reporting things that people need to know. There is a real danger, and you and Sarah Carter are probably at the forefront of investigating this, and that is, I thank God for intelligence, as we saw in Barcelona earlier today, against ISIS and radical Islam and against Iran and China and Russia and all these countries. They're not our friends. They're not our friends, and we need to know about dangers that we may face. We give them the most powerful tools, but if those tools are turned against the American people and used against the American people illegally because we have laws that prevent that, that's a very dangerous scenario. What about the IT guy of Debbie Wasserman Schultz that got 4 counts today charged with?
Yeah, very interesting, right? There's a lot we don't know in that case as well. But this is a gentleman that worked in the ID department, had access to congressional computers, congressional secrets, possibly her DNC email, and he's now been indicted on 4 charges, mostly related to bank fraud and other questions that have come up. But there's a lot of new information that I'm hearing in law enforcement circles that they're developing about what he did at day, at night, and I think they're looking at some possible connections to other activity besides the charges that were filed today. And I think we're going to learn a lot from the Capitol Police, the FBI, in the coming months about that case. That's a very open and uncertain question about what happened to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's emails.
It's going to be interesting to see what Dana Rohrabacher came back with, and I think the American people need to know the truth. And I'm calling on Robert Mueller tonight. He is investigating supposed collusion. He has a duty to find out what that information is, and the same thing with Congress. The Republicans are in charge. They have subpoena powers, investigative powers. They need to do their job, because this has been 11 months long, no evidence yet presented. Thank you, John Solomon. Keep up the good work.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. The left continues its crusade to take down President Trump. Former Vice President Al Gore is calling for President Trump to resign. And some members of the mainstream media are also trying to gin up outrage and are making things a lot worse. Here's just a few of the latest examples. Watch.
I'm an optimist. I have never been as discouraged as I have been this week about our country.
Yeah, it seems that we're at a low point in American history. Last month, the president compared
Civil War was probably a little worse. That was bad.
Well, I'm worried about what's coming.
Great Depression, pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
That was probably worse.
This is a pretty low point.
We're going to start taking down every monument that pays tribute to racists. We should probably take down every building with the name Trump on it, you know?
And yesterday, CNN's Wolf Blitzer questioned whether the Barcelona terror attack was a copycat of what happened in Charlottesville. Watch this.
There will be questions about copycats. There will be questions if what happened in Barcelona was at all a copycat version of what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, even though there may be different characters, different political ambitions. They use the same killing device, a vehicle going at high speed into a large group of pedestrians.
And joining us now with reaction, Fox News contributor Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Lieutenant Colonel West, you recently wrote that you found it rather odd that so many people were trying to blame President Trump for what happened in Charlottesville. Why do you feel that way?
Well, and it's good to be with you, Kimberly. What I find very interesting is that everything now has to come back to white supremacists. Everything now has to be about racism. You know, I was listening to some of the clips that you were playing. You know, a low point for me during the Obama administration, when we knew that we had a president, we had a Secretary of State, and we had a National Security Advisor that had abandoned Americans to die during an Islamic terrorist attack, and then they lied about it. And nothing was ever done. No one ever remembers those 4 Americans who lost their lives and the family members who were shunned. And so when I think about someone like a Wolf Blitzer, obviously he's quite delusional. He has not been around for quite some time, because the terrorists have been using this vehicular attack, this terrorist-style attack, going back to Bastille Day in Nice, France, going back to what happened at the German Christmas market, going back just recently is what we have seen happen in England. So, again, everything has to be about what their message du jour is right now, is everyone is a white supremacist, everyone is a neo-Nazi or Klan member, as long as they don't agree with their agenda. And what I do find interesting is that you have someone like Maxine Waters and others in the Democrat Party who so fight for Planned Parenthood, but yet Margaret Sanger was an incredibly well-known white supremacist.
Unbelievable, really. When you examine the facts and the historical record, it tells quite a different tale. And just to dovetail on, your comments here, I mean, you have a lot of these jihad-inspired magazines like Inspire, et cetera, talking about kind of terrorist playbook and what you need to do. And that's been widely distributed in terms of using vehicles to commit acts of terror. So this isn't something that just fell, out of the terror lap.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so this has been something that's been going on for quite some time. And you have never heard anyone from the left really come out and condemn Islamic supremacy. When you look at the terrorist attacks that have happened here in the United States of America, Fort Hood with Major Nadal Hassan is still classified as workplace violence. The President of the United States of America never said anything about the Chattanooga attack that killed 5 of our sailors and Marines on a Naval Reserve installation. When you look at Orlando and San Bernardino, there was no acceptance that this was an Islamic supremacist attack or a jihadist attack. It was about gun control. So I really find it very, disgusting and deplorable, the obfuscation, the dismissal and denial, because if it does not fit into their ideological agenda or their talking points, they're not going to stand up for it.
All right, yeah, obfuscation and denial, 2 of the most powerful weapons, that they use. And if I can just get your quick comments on the departure of Steve Bannon, the impact you might think that it has on President Trump's administration.
Well, I think that what will remain to be seen is in the next 30 to 60 days, what will be Mr. Bannon's actions? Will he fight strongly for the administration from the outside, or will he take a different approach? And that will let us know under the terms by which he was separated.
All right, excellent. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, always a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimberly.